Well, look, I'm just going to say this. If I look at physical weight that somebody may carry with them, they always have the option to leave something behind. So if it gives you peace of mind, just because you may have spoken to a lot of people who've done it before, your guide or the lead guide or the organizers may say, here's a checklist of things you need. And like, but I feel more comfortable if I just took an extra toothbrush. If that really makes you happy, go ahead and take it. You always have the option to let it go at some point. But if you did start climbing, like, oh my God, I just lost mine. I knew I always do. I wish I had that other toothbrush with me. Then you start having challenges, and that is a distraction that takes you away from your primary objective. Now, I will say,
welcome back to the Perpetual Growth Podcast, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that help you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Quick ask before we dive in today. If you get value from these conversations, please follow the show, share the episode with someone who needs it, and leave a review. It's how we keep bringing world-class guests like today's on the podcast. If you ever looked successful on paper, but felt stretched, disconnected, or quietly unfulfilled behind the scenes, this conversation's for you. Today's guest is Saahil Mehta, a leadership and peak performance coach who helps founders and executives scale their impact without sacrificing their health, relationships, or inner peace. Saahil is part of Dr. Marshall Goldsmith's 100 coaches and works with leaders around the world who want to succeed without burning out or losing themselves in the process. This conversation is about clarity, alignment, and living what Saahil calls a zero regret life. Saahil, welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast.
Thank you, Zach. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you here today, and excited to dive in and start learning a little bit more about your wisdom and experience. Now, Saahil, I always start here because I believe it really reveals a lot about who someone really is and how they really think. What does growth mean to you right now in this season of your life?
Well, first, I'd like to start by defining growth. I used to think growth meant just growing in terms of knowledge and relationships and whatever else may be what you feel is a desire in your life. But I've realized over the years that growth, when it's relevant to your definition of success, that's true growth. Because I could get better at something, but if it brings me no joy or it's not taking me in the direction I wish to go, is it growth? So that begs the question. And so I remember having this conversation with a captain of an army, because I climb mountains, and I always tell him that I carry things that are relevant for my mountaineering trips. I carry them in a backpack. If I take anything extra, it doesn't really help me out. It's just weighing me down, right? And then he corrected me and he said, you're actually carrying things that are relevant. Because you could carry things that bring you joy or that could be useful, but it's extra weight. So how do you find that balance of carrying just the minimum amount required in order for you to grow faster? And he told me, he said the only two exceptions that he was making when he was in the army climbing mountains as well were he would carry something like some sort of charm or a family photo or something, just to give him a boost every time he felt down. And he said he just carried one thing extra because he knew that every time he climbed a mountain, usually someone forgot something. So that was just a way of helping another person out.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, for me, growth right now is my children are entering, or one has become a teenager, the other one is soon to become a teenager. And it's really just being the guide in their life and dedicating more of my time with them to steer them, because now they're starting to make very important decisions that will determine what kind of career they may be interested in, what kind of university they go into. And so that's the important part of growth in my life right now, because for me, family is my second priority after me being the first.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I mean, I personally believe that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. We have to find joy in not only the destination, but the journey. And we've got to get clarity on where we're moving. We all know fuzzy targets don't get hit. And the whole impetus behind carrying that that object, that token, that picture is remembering our why, because it's not a question of if problems are going to happen, but when. And the most important decision that we can make in any given moment is what we do next. When we get knocked down, do we stay there or do we get back up? Now, I love that because it also resonates with me on a family level. I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 17, middle's 9, youngest is 6. So I've got one that's right on the precipice of graduation, which is uh, candidly an utterly terrifying moment in time for me right now.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I feel like I get heart palpitations even just saying it out loud right now. I mean, she's an outstanding young lady. She's very, very smart. And at the same time, as a parent, you start going through all these questions. If I actually set her up to succeed as she moves into young adulthood, if I prepared her properly. I mean, so we're having all of these different conversations that, you anticipate and then you don't. Now, I want to go back to something that you said about that balance of weight, of what you carry with you, because there's so many different mindsets and philosophies when it comes to what we do bring with us on any given journey. And I think this is an important dichotomy to address, because if we are underprepared, if we're climbing Everest, there's a very delicate balance. If you carry too much, you're going to exhaust yourself and minimize the probability of yourself being able to reach the destination. And at the same time, if you're underprepared for the journey and you don't have the tools, resources, things that you need for the unforeseen, the unexpected, then you could put yourself in a very precarious place. So as people are navigating life and business and health and relationships, how do you help them determine what is most appropriate for the stage of life, the field of play that they are currently on? Help unpack that for me, if you would.
Absolutely. Well, look, I'm just going to say this. If I look at physical weight that somebody may carry with them, they always have the option to leave something behind. So if it gives you peace of mind, just because you may have spoken to a lot of people who've done it before, your guide or the lead guide or the organizers may say, here's a checklist of things you need, and like, but I feel more comfortable if I just took an extra toothbrush. If that really makes you happy, go ahead and take it. You always have the option to let it go at some point. But if you did start climbing, like, oh my God, I just lost mine, I knew I always do, I wish I had that other toothbrush with me, then you start having challenges, and that is a distraction that takes you away from your primary objective. Now, I will say, too much preparation, what is that? We can highlight what are the most common challenges that may occur. So whenever I take a group up a mountain, we always discuss the what ifs, because when we're at 20,000 feet, I'm not getting into a discussion. We can't think straight. Air is thin, we're tired, we're maybe perhaps very emotional, and we're just not able to think straight. So at ground zero, before we climb, one of the things we do is we go through all the what if scenarios and give the opportunity to every climber to share their what if scenarios. Now, if someone says, what if an asteroid falls out of the sky and hits us? Sure, it can happen. I'm not saying there's zero probability of that happening, but it's so small that it's not worth considering. So we do look at the most common what if scenarios, not just to a mountain, but to that specific region as well. So by doing that, everyone has already gone through if this happens, this is what we will do next. And that gives you that level of comfort and safety. So when you are on the mountain and something goes a bit sideways, you already have the answers, and then you take action.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like probability, someone saying, what if what if a dinosaurs come back? I mean, sure, maybe one day they may, I don't know. But if that's what's holding you back, you have to ask yourself, the probability is so low, it's not worth considering.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. One thing I'm curious about, and just continue with the analogy of climbing is where does leverage play into this conversation? And more specifically, what I'm referring to is most people aren't making a climb, an ascent of that magnitude alone. So, we tend to think I've got to carry all the weight, but the reality is we're more often than not going to be climbing with a team. I mean, in most areas of life, we're not doing it alone, at least if we want to do it successfully and again with more joy and fulfillment. So where does the leverage, the strength of a team play into any given journey when it comes to these aspects of leadership and development? How do you where's that integration point or intersection for you?
Well, that's a very good point. So look, I'm going to just share two examples. One is when I take people up a mountain that is, let's call it 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 feet in that range, which where the risks are very low in terms of someone having a major accident or dying, the energy of the team is less relevant. And I say that not by my core team. So the core guides and everything, we really make sure we pick the right people who are wonderful human beings, not just skilled individuals. But the people who sign up for these retreats, I can't control that. Someone may turn out to be a bit of a bother. Someone may turn out to be a great joy to have. But again, the stakes are not high from our perspective. For them, it's a big deal because it's the first mountain they're climbing. But from us who are experienced, we see it again and again. We go, you know what? The stakes are not so high. As long as the core team is solid, we can manage. That being said, when we're doing high altitude, when we're crossing, let's say, 17,000 feet, 18,000 feet, now every member of the team, their presence can really make a big difference. The stakes are way higher. And so whenever people want to join me on these climbs, we literally have long conversations with them, make sure that there's alignment in terms of core values and energy. Because if we start facing problems, it's going to be a huge issue and potential safety issue as well for the rest of the climbers. So my answer to you is it really depends on the stakes. And when the stakes are low, it doesn't matter as much. But when the stakes are high, that team and the energy of the people, there has to be alignment. There has to be unity. Because when things get tough, we all work together, support one another, and kind of nudge each other along and just say, get that next step. Come on, just take that next step. And eventually, weather permitting, we make it to the summit.
Beautiful. I love that idea. I mean, the way that you position that, because I like this idea of this escalating hierarchy. I mean, fundamentally, the stakes are lower, but there's still an important theme. Is the one of the constants is you have to have the right people in leadership positions early on, and as the stakes escalate, now the importance of alignment and core values, because of the level of continuity and synergy that's going to be required to overcome those given obstacles, becomes even more important. And I think that's absolutely true in every area of life, in health, wealth, relationships, in business development. I mean, I think about that when I'm building and developing any team in business, whether it's a leadership team, sales team, whatever. Some of the filters that I'm initially looking through is, one, obviously, do they have the skill set or aptitude to perform at a high level? Are they a good match for our particular client, our segment in the market? Do they have the personality? Are they going to be a good fit for the culture that we have or the culture that we are trying to build? And then one of the most important values is not that one's necessarily any more important than the other, but is, do they believe in that product or service? Do they believe in the vision? Do they believe in the why, the mission, the whole reason that we are doing the thing that we are doing? Now, I would
Can I
love
add
to.
to that? Can I add something to that, Zach? I just want to say that it's also important to have the courage to say no to someone if they're not the right fit. Because on one of the climbs, we had someone who wanted to join us, someone who I've known for many years, in fact, and I declined. And my wife actually got upset at me that it's someone that we know in our friendship circle. How can you be so rude? I said, look, if we were, I said, the level of trust is just not there. It's not enough for that individual to join this trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, as the lead facilitator, I'm responsible for, partially responsible for everyone there along with the lead guide. I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
I get it that you don't like it, but my responsibility is not whether I'm nice to someone or not, is to make sure that the energy with the team that's going up is solid and there are no cracks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. In one of my businesses, I'm supporting a lot of members of the military at the moment, and a way I like to think about that I think complements what you're saying is I think one thing that I would anticipate to be true for most members of the military is if they're deployed, they're overseas, they're moving into a war zone. Are they going to feel more comfortable, confident, safe, aligned going to war with a handful of civilians or a handful of their brothers and sisters in arms? And there's you have to have that sanctity of mind and confidence because people are either an anchor or a propeller in our lives, and they can be both, again, depending on the relationship dynamic in different fields of play. And that's why it's so important to be hyper selective and emotionally competent and aware as you are navigating different life scenarios. Now, I'd love to zoom out for a moment because I think a lot of high performers listening are doing everything right and still feeling off. What's a belief about success or leadership that you once held that you had to consciously let go of?
I love your question. So let me give a little context. I run three businesses, right? I'm a first generation entrepreneur in two of the businesses and a second generation entrepreneur in the third. At the age of, I can't remember exactly, but I think I was 37 years old.
Mhm.
I checked all the boxes of what I thought was success. 7-figure net worth, married with kids, nice home, driving a Porsche, nice watches, traveling the world, no personal debt. And I'm just thinking, I should be jumping up and down with joy,
Yeah.
but I wasn't.
Mhm.
And I realized that I was having health issues. I was constantly bloated because of inflammation. I was waking up with a foggy mind. My nose would be stuffed every morning. The relationship with my father and my wife were okay. I say okay. It wasn't that it was bad, but we just weren't addressing things that were important.
Mhm.
So that created distance between us. And I realized very quickly at that point, Zach, that I was living an inherited definition of success. One that came down through a combination of family, society, media, social media, educational system, etc. And it got me thinking. I said, Sahil, we all have our own unique fingerprints, yet so many of us are talking about the same definition of success. How does that make any sense? And that kind of put me on this journey of discovering what was important for me. What does success mean for me? And then over the years of identifying clutter and removing it, and then understanding what's important for me, I started to develop this framework, which I now call the Exponential Success Blueprint, which enables people to discover what success means to them without any influence from the outside. And
Yeah.
it goes a little bit like this. In the mountaineering world, we have 7 summits. You climb this, the tallest mountain on each continent. And when you climb them all, you've conquered the world, right? So I thought to myself, well, what about conquering our inner world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I love 7. You got lucky number 7, the 7 summits, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 dwarves. It pops. It's a nice number, and because people often ask me, Zach, why not 3? And I said, well, if I asked you for 3, you just pick health, wealth, and relationships.
Mhm.
That's too easy. When it's 7, you have to think beyond what else is important in my life.
Mhm.
And for example, something that came up for me, which I was very pleased with actually, is fun and recreation.
Mhm.
And now that I know what my 7 summits are and I've prioritized them and I understood what the summit of these mountains look like and where I am now, so I can chart my journey. Now the steps that I'm taking, and this is in line with the first question you asked, growth is happening in the direction of what I've defined as success. So it feels a lot more fulfilling to me. And that basically is taking me away from regret. And
Mhm.
now that I've shared this with hundreds of entrepreneurs, business owners, they're following a similar system. and they're taking steps which again are in line with their direction of success, as opposed to this inherited one, which most people call fame and fortune.
Right, right. You know, what's interesting about this, I mean, there's several things to unpack there. Now, one, and I don't want to get too deep, but we have both implicit and explicit memories, right? Implicit being, a lot of people don't realize, I mean, we literally have memory imprints that are passed down generationally, that are encoded in our DNA, that are not us, right?
Mm.
But they have been carried because of traumatic emotional events and all of these different things. And then we have the explicit, the stuff that we're being exposed to and conditioned in our environment and through social media and friends and family and geographic exposures, and the list goes on and on and on. So there's so much truth to everything that you're saying, that most of our current field of view is limited to everything that we have experienced thus far, and we're trying to meet somebody else's standards for success and fulfillment and desires. So I love that you had this moment where you took that step back and you were like, okay, obviously there's something more. I have an internal, and the one thing that's really important to point out to the audience, it's that moment of awareness. What most people do is they notice there's an emotion, there's something that feels, there's an element of dis-ease. But what do? They keep moving forward because that's what we're taught to do. But what the most important thing that we can do is stop and acknowledge any given emotion, a moment, because it's there to teach us something. And you actually had the wisdom to pause and ask yourself a better quality of question. And the reality is, we ask ourselves better questions, and what happens? We get better answers. Now, I'm curious about how, maybe this is a better question. If you could give our listeners one tip as to where they get started on that journey, what's the first step? What's the first thing that they could do, that they could implement right now, today, in this moment, if they are feeling some element of discomfort, dissatisfaction, misalignment in any area of their life, so that they can start this journey?
So whenever you feel disconnected, you feel a challenge, you feel this emotion that's not serving you, that's pulling you down, let's just link that to energy. Your energy feels off, right? Something is not right. You don't quite know what it is, but it feels off. And I can give a very simple exercise. It only will take 2 minutes of your time on a daily basis. So it's
Yeah.
not a big ask, right?
Yes.
In the evening, get a pen and paper, or pencil and paper, anything, but try to avoid digital devices so there's no distractions, and ask yourself the following question: what drained my energy levels today?
Wow.
And just write that down. Whatever comes to your mind, anything at all, there's no rule to this. Just write anything that comes. Don't think about it, just write. And we don't want to end on that note. So ask yourself the second question: what raised my energy levels today? So that before you go to bed, you're on a bit of a high, right?
Yeah.
Keep doing that day after day. Again, 2 minutes a day. Keep doing that again and again, whether you do it daily or every 2 days or every 3 days, but do it frequently. What you'll start to notice is you'll see patterns, that every time a certain type of situation occurred, your energy was drained. That is clutter, my friends. That is something that needs attention. And once you eliminate that, just imagine how much better your life can be.
Yeah.
And the things which are elevating your energy, same story. If you see things that are being repeated and they elevate your energy, how can you do more of that in your life? So that already starts you on a shift towards what feels better for you. And that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. I love that tip and that strategy. And what was so fascinating about it is, the moment that you shared the first question, my brain started answering, of course. And second, I started feeling this internal resistance, because I'm like, I don't want to go to bed on a low note. So I'm glad that you had that antithesis, that swing of the pendulum, and awareness that we're like, hey, let's actually find what's good in this too, right? Because if we don't take time to identify the things that don't feel good, to oversimplify, then it's going to be very difficult to determine what does feel good, what feels right. And again, most people are just blindly pushing through. And I always say, there's nothing dumber than running the wrong direction enthusiastically. right?
Yeah.
We, but
You know,
so many
and
of
I'm
us do
sure,
it.
yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the audience can relate to this. You know, the former version of myself wakes up, I wake the kids up. This is when they were much younger, help them get ready. While they're getting ready, make sure they have breakfast, drop them to school, work out, come back, have a quick breakfast, rush to work, work, quick lunch on the desk or on the go, on the move. You know, got to get through all these tasks. I've got this big to do list, work, come home, barely made it home in time to put the kids to bed, put them to bed, read them a story, then had dinner with the missus, and had some perhaps a little bit of energy left to do some activity of some sort, either with her, meet the parents, some friends, whatever, go to bed, repeat.
Mhm. Yeah.
Where did I invest time in myself in that day?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't. I was just running all the time. And I said to myself, I said, Sal, how do you expect to grow if you don't invest in yourself?
Mhm.
And so, you know, when people say I have no time, that's why I said I'm giving you this short tip that only requires 2 minutes. And as you start to see the benefits, I assure you, you'll start investing more and more time into yourself. And if I look at myself today, I told you before, I run 3 businesses. I now allocate at least 2 hours each day just for myself.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm already looking at how I can increase that even more.
Mm. Yeah. What a gift. And not enough of us take time to honor and celebrate ourselves. I mean, there's almost a conditioning that taking time for you is selfish. But it's an important degree of selfishness because the only way that we can become selfless is, well, I mean, simply put, you can't pour from a cup that's empty,
Yeah.
right? We have to take, we have to fill our own cup first. And that comes in many different forms. I mean, in terms of the people that we surround ourselves with, the knowledge, information that we are absorbing and consuming on a daily basis, movement, exercise, the things that we are consuming and putting in our physical body, from the things that we drink to the things that we eat. So, I mean, there's many different elements to that. Now, Saahil, I'm going to pause for just a second. I mean, if anyone is listening right now and realizing, like, I don't need another tactic, I need clarity. Sahil's work goes far beyond conversations like this. I mean, through coaching, workshops, and his zero regret life framework, Sahil helps leaders declutter mentally, emotionally, and strategically. And that way they can lead with intention instead of exhaustion. Now, we're going to link Sahil's work, including his assessments and leadership and the resources and the show notes. So just make sure you can dive in and explore what alignment actually looks like for you. Now, Sahil, I'm a firm believer that vulnerability is a superpower. And I also believe that life has its seasons. I know when I was younger in my business career, I operated under the illusion or delusion that I needed to work 60, 80, 120 hours a week to accomplish the outcomes that I wanted to accomplish. And I believe it's the Parkinson's law was one of the most profound concepts that I was introduced to. I mean, to get the amount of time that we allocate to any given task is the amount that we will take to do it. And you mentioned it much earlier in the conversation. Sometimes we are pouring time into something, but that doesn't always equate to progress. I know for me in this season of life, after I had gone through that season, I'd said, I'm never going to work or sacrifice that much time for my family, my health, and whatever concept ever again. Uh, and I did that very successfully for quite a while. And I've gone through several major life seasons over the last few years, starting new businesses, taking time to self reflect, ask myself those questions. Who do I really want to become? What do I really want to do? How can I best contribute to the world and feel fulfilled and create the time to spend with my kids? And the irony is, through some of those seasons, I'm in one of those seasons where I'm working now again more than I had in a very long time. And at this particular stage, it does feel like an absolute necessity. It's a very different type of time utilization than it was. It wasn't delusional. It's not delusional now like it was in the past. It's intentional, but I still fight that I still have that inner conflict where there's that part of me. It's like you said, you would never do this again. And then there's the part of me that recognizes that life has its seasons and nothing lasts forever. When you've got an entrepreneur that's in a similar season, how do you help them work through that type of inner conflict?
So there's a couple of things that I'll mention over here. One is, and I'm gonna share something, a personal story which might shed some light. I told you the two of the businesses, I'm a first gen, one business I'm second gen. The one where I'm a second gen, my father, he started the business and he passed away now 5 years ago. He was the captain of that ship. I was just supporting him. I wouldn't even call myself a partner. I would call myself an employee because I was just supporting him wherever he needed help, but he was running that ship.
Yeah.
Now, when he passed away, one of the businesses that I started was brand new. And that's this one that we're speaking about, where I'm working with business owners to stress less, grow faster, and move towards a zero regret life by really redefining what success means so they have more inner peace. Now, that's the business I should have given up, because if I had no other family members in the business, I had to take over everything. It was all on my shoulders. And now the responsibility of my mother, the family, everything has suddenly come on me. Add to that, we were moving houses and renovating the place we were moving into, and we were shifting offices, which was also being renovated. So 2 construction sites and everything coming onto my shoulders at the same time.
Wow.
Now, I asked myself, I said, Sahil, you have to give up this new business because that is not generating as much income as the other two, and it doesn't need your time. But here's the thing, my definition of success, a lot of that business was a big chunk of my definition of success in terms of being able to serve others and myself. And I said, if I stop this business, it's taking a piece of me away. And so I'm in this dilemma. I'm in this flux. I'm thinking, what do I do? Because I have my mom saying now the responsibility is on your shoulders. And she has all these expectations because she saw my dad working many hours, because that's just how things were in his time. That's the mindset he had, the belief system he had. I work a very different way because I just believe that, work as efficiently as you can. It's not necessarily the hours that you put in, it's how efficient you work and then taking care of yourself. So when you do make a decision, you're making the right one and you're not having as much leakage in those decisions. But anyway, I looked at everything that I had to do as responsibility and I asked myself the following 2 questions. What are decisions that only you can make, that no one else in the team has the ability to make? And then what are the decisions that you love making? So I made that list and I realized there was a ton of things that other people could make or that I did not enjoy doing. And so then started the journey of empowering and delegating and bringing in new folks into the company.
True leadership.
Yeah. Right? Because that shift, and this was more reactive than proactive, which is why I share this story, because people who are listening can be more proactive about this. It was my father's death that resulted in this process taking place, which enabled me to change the processes and systems in our company and empower others and bring in more people where required. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something that I had designed. But because I knew what success meant to me, I would refuse to give up the one business that fueled my soul. I couldn't give that up because then I wouldn't be as a joyful person to be around. I wouldn't be as happy, and that will affect everything else, my family life, my business life, etc. So now, as a result of this, yes, it was hard for those few months, but I look at that as a transition period. I didn't say this is how life will be and I just need to work harder and faster, which will eventually lead to burnout. I knew it was not sustainable, Zach. And so I said, even though I don't have the answers right now, I went through all these processes and over a few months, things started to shift. So yes, there were sacrifices, but I knew the sacrifices were temporary. The biggest challenge I see with the business owners I work with is they tell me, yes, family is my priority. And then I'm just watching them over the 1 year I'm working with them, if not longer. And I say, you keep making sacrifices for family and for your health, and you keep telling me they're the most important things. I have to be the mirror here and tell you that this is your lifestyle choice. It's not a sacrifice anymore. It's only a sacrifice if it's temporary. But when one thing ended, you found another thing to sacrifice with. So you
Mhm.
have to be honest with yourself. But again, once you have the wheels in motion,
Yeah.
at least you know the end is in sight versus I'm here and this is how my life is. And I don't know what's going to happen next because that will lead to burnout.
Yes.
It's just not
Yes.
sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the same conversation I have with myself on a frequent basis is that consistent reminder that this is just a season and it's not someplace that I'm going to stay. I'm not willing to tolerate it. I absolutely will not. And I think that's an important distinction for all of the listeners too, is you get what you tolerate. We all have the moment, we all have the opportunity to make a new decision. Now, you mentioned something really important too, through the power of story, which was a combination of systemization and leverage through the people that you surround yourself with. And I find it fascinating because I think about my personal journey, and I started in a small family business. I was the only full-time employee, two part-time, grew it to 17 individuals, then moved on to work with 8 and 9 figure businesses with 200 plus employees. Very different worlds, very different dynamics. And in those leadership roles, I'm a firm believer that in alignment with what you said, I mean, leaders create more leaders. We have to teach,
Absolutely.
the values, the systems, the strategies, the beliefs that have helped to compel and propel us to the heights that we have achieved in all aspects of life. It's not just about what you accomplish in business, but it's about fulfillment across context. What's really where it feels paradoxical to me at sometimes is it's one thing to be able to have these conversations as a business owner where I have a bit more, at least perceived, power and control. But what if it's an executive, somebody that has this expectations of the company that's telling you that you got to get this done, that has the mountain of things that's sitting on their desk, that now feels like they don't have that power of choice because they feel like they are in a metaphorical prison where if they make a new decision, they lose everything they built around them. What then?
For me, and I don't work necessarily with leaders I only work exclusively with business owners. So my
Mm-hmm.
work is very catered towards them. But what I see there is there's an internal conflict in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
That person, there's a story that's going on in his or her head,
Always.
right? And the way that I would address it, because I see that more as a communication challenge. There's so many times that we build stories in our minds only later to find out that they were completely false.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
Right? The success rate of the stories in our mind being true are very low. At
Mhm.
least that's been my experience with the leaders I've worked with. So that if you feel that way, it begs the question that why is a conversation not being had with your peers or your superior to discuss what you are going through? Is there a way for you to communicate what you're feeling, be open about it, and have that conversation? Because if it's something relevant and the other person doesn't know about it, there's, what's going to happen? Nothing. But if you have the conversation, at least you have a little bit more clarity on how you may be able to address that particular situation. So I always say that communication is usually what's lacking in many challenges that are being faced in life, whether it's in the workplace or at home, because we're listening to the story in our head as opposed to the actual story that's going on the outside.
Yeah. No, that's extremely insightful. And I think there's another small, I believe I know that there's another small takeaway from what you just said, which is, have you had that conversation with your superior? And if you haven't, one, when would now be a good time? But two, in certain instances, maybe people have tried and they have not been, that leader has not been receptive. What that also tells you is that brings us back to that internal conflict. Maybe that is God, the universe, whatever your belief system that is now saying, look, maybe it's time to make a new decision. Maybe there's a misalignment with the organization that I'm with right now. And this is a higher power that it's telling me there's something better for me out there. There's something that is going to create better, that has better alignment with our core values. And it's scary. Any new decision is scary in the moment, but real growth comes through a new decision. We all know the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. It's just not going to happen. Now, as we get close to the end of today's episode, I wanted to ask one little follow-up question on this, is because I think this is also a very important distinction. I know for me, I've had many times where I know I'm an outstanding communicator. I know in leadership positions, I've built environments where people feel very comfortable having these conversations with me, regardless if it's a client or an employee. And I know the value and importance of it. And I also know at the same time where I can be so effective in these parts of my life and world, as you mentioned before, then you step into a different part of your world, a different part of your life. Maybe it's the relationship dynamic with your father. Maybe it's with my kids or my wife. And all of a sudden, it feels like the same things that I am so good at in one particular environment. It's like you're trying to learn a new language overnight or something. What I don't know what the best question is even to ask here is, how do you, where does that internal shift need to happen to be able to create the space to now start to build those relationships? I'll give you a little more context. My father's is just about 80 years old. He's currently battling brain cancer, and it, you there's a lot of questions that you start to ask yourself. And he's very much the traditional Stoic, and I love the man to death. And for all those same reasons, it's always felt challenging to have those deeper conversations with him that I would have with all the people that I surround myself with, because I love that depth. But I can feel that he wants to have them, but he just doesn't know how to have them either. Where do you start?
I'm going to share another story to highlight this point. And I'm sorry to hear about your father having brain cancer, and I really wish that there's as minimal pain for him and the rest of the family as possible. I was on my 40th birthday in Bali, and it was a very spiritual celebration. Ice baths, yoga, shamanic breathwork, plant-based food, no caffeine, no alcohol. I mean, we're just in this beautiful setting. So a lot of inner work, a lot of reflection. And I think it was the fourth day, and I'm just surrounded by what I can only explain as heaven, in the foothills. So this is Ubud, which is a very green part of Bali. And my dad calls me up and he says, "Saahil, you must have received an OTP on your phone. Can I please have that?" And then that was the end of the conversation. I gave the OTP and that was it. Now, in my mind, I don't know what was going on in his mind, but our relationship had been rocky prior to that trip for some time now. And yes, we would fulfill our roles as a father or as a son, and in some cases, business partners. But I was missing that father-son relationship that I had in my earlier years, where there'd be laughter and we just do an activity together. We talk about something silly or something deep. It didn't matter. It was just that bonding. I guess life kind of got in the way, as well as all these conversations in my head that felt confrontational. So I just never had them. Or if I did, or if he did, it was usually ending up with a lot of anger. So anyway, for me, that was kind of the final nail in the coffin, because I said, we've just spoken after 4 days and all we spoke about was a stupid OTP.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I call him back and I say, "Dad, I just want to let you know that I love you." And then I just broke down on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting emotional speaking about it now, but
Yeah, me too.
yeah, he he said, "I love you." And then I could see that he's very uncomfortable with emotions. I don't know if it's to do with this whole boys don't cry or boys don't share their emotions, all this bullshit that we've heard growing up.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said, call your mother up and tell her the same. And then he hung up. That was his way to kind of, bypass it. But
Power of
I
deflection.
realized when I got back, I realized that he was not going to take the first step.
Mhm.
And I knew that I had to be that person.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have an agenda. I just had an agreement with myself that no matter what he said, I would be curious and non judgmental. He's from a different generation. He sees the world through his eyes. I see it through mine. We don't see the same thing. And that's with everyone.
Yeah.
So I just started having conversations and I spoke about things he loves talking about. He loved talking about his childhood, some of the challenges he faced, and I just would listen to his stories. And then sometimes the stories would lead to something like he would tell me, Sahil, because he didn't like that I would drink alcohol.
Mhm.
I'm not a big drinker, but he just didn't like that I had it at all, even if it was just one glass.
Mhm.
He said, in my time, my friends, we used to have these pockets on our shirt, and my friends, they used to keep their cigarette packet in their pocket, but they wouldn't have it in front of their parents. But I'm like, you can see the packet. He goes, yeah,
Right.
but they would not have it in front of their parents.
Yeah.
His thing was, don't do it in front of me, do it behind my back. And my philosophy is, especially with our children, if whatever they do, I would rather they do it in front of me and we could have a conversation about it.
100%.
But if I go and try to change his belief system, which is so deeply ingrained, I'm the idiot.
Yeah.
I can't change anyone who doesn't wish to change.
Yes.
And it took me so many years to discover that. I don't know why.
Mhm.
So rather than trying to change him, I just understood his perspective. And we just had all these kind of conversation and shared our own views. And that just allowed us to have a bond. And like I said, the only thing I agreed with myself is that I would not lose my temper, no matter what he said. And if he did say something that pressed a trigger, I should be grateful because that means there's something unresolved inside of me that still needs resolving. So I just kept having the conversations with him. And Zach, I'm so happy that I did because a year after we started this journey of just kind of building that bond as a father and son, he contracted COVID. 2 weeks later, he was 2 weeks in the hospital, and 6 weeks in the hospital. Out of that, 4 weeks on the ventilator, and he passed away.
Wow.
If I didn't have those conversations with him, I would have so much regret in my life. And because it was a priority for me and I made it a priority, I didn't make up any more excuses. I started to build that bond again.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I did because at least I now have happier memories of us together in the final year of his life versus I should have, but now I can't.
Yes. Sahil, thank you for that gift. I mean, I could not possibly imagine or think of any better way to illustrate the importance of what we do next. You know, like everybody's waiting for the right time to have the conversation, to make the new decision in business, to start taking care of their health, whatever it is. And, I said it before is when would now be a good time? Got to ask myself that same question. So thank you for that, my friend. Um, before we wrap up today, I want to highlight some powerful takeaways from this conversation with Sahil. One, success without alignment quietly erodes fulfillment. Growth isn't just grounded in values. Growth that isn't grounded in values eventually creates internal friction, no matter how impressive it looks externally. Clarity is a leadership advantage, not a luxury. The most effective leaders aren't doing more, they're doing less with greater intention. And a zero regret life is built daily, not retroactively. Regret isn't about failure, it's about misalignment left unaddressed for too long. Those three things alone are worth sitting with. Now, Sahil, again, thank you so much for the depth, the clarity, the grounded wisdom that you brought to this conversation. For everyone listening, if this episode resonated, take a moment to reflect where your growth is aligned and where it might be asking for a little recalibration. Now, if you found value here, follow the show, share the episode with someone who needs it, leave a review. It's how the podcast continues to grow. So, Hill, we're going to have all of your links in the show notes. Is there any preferred place that you would like our guests to find you, what's
Yeah,
best?
absolutely. Look, there's a webinar on my website which enables you to start the journey of defining success for yourself, identifying what's that excess baggage you're carrying, and what steps can you take on a daily basis to start your journey of moving towards a life of fulfillment. It only costs you time and energy. It's complimentary. If you go to www.sahilmehta.com, that's SAAHILMEHTA.com/success, that's where you can begin your journey. And that's my gift to you.
What a gift. And it's not a cost, it's an investment, my friend, and an investment in yourself. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for the gifts to me personally and to all of our listeners. I mean, there's so much to come back to. I would absolutely say that you'll want to give this more than one listen. Now, until next time, remember, growth doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. We'll see you on the next episode.